Harvey, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Okay.
I'm going to mute myself.
Commissioner Suchman is encouraging you to adjust your curtains.
If I did that, it would totally.
Thank you, Andrew.
How's
Just
that?
throw me under
Is that
the
better?
bus.
No accountability here. All right. Okay.
That's the best I can get it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Public Service Commission's annual performance review of utility reliance and reliability case number 9352.
Good morning, Chair Hoover. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Pull it a little closer, okay. Good morning, Chair Hoover, Commissioners. Sam Wright-Derari on behalf of the Engineering Division. This is a team report, and we have our team of engineers who participated in drafting this report with us today. Chris Lowe to my left, who compiled the report, so thank you, Chris. And we also have Latanja Bunch, DeAndre Wilson, and Roger Austin on the report. I'd also like to thank Michael Dean from Staff Council for assisting the case. And finally, I would like to thank our utilities for being responsive to our data requests. Staff filed its report on July 16, 2024, but we also made some supplemental filings last Friday, July 26, on issues including wildfire mitigation plan and our review of PEs and BGEs action plans that the Commission required the companies to provide in regards to improving their major outage event performances. This is from the last reliability report. I will touch on that in my conclusion and recommendation slides. I will start our presentation by providing an overview of the annual reliability matrices and standards that utilities are required to report on. As you will see in this slide, green means that the company is in full compliance with that specific standard, and red implies that the company is not in compliance. So generally, there are 11 standards that utilities were required to report on for the 2023 reporting period, and except for BGE that failed the periodic equipment inspection standard, and BGE that failed, and PE that failed the first performing standard, and the customer communications standard, PEPCO, Delmarva, and SMECO fully met the service and reliability standards for 2023. We will discuss in the next slides PEs and BGEs non-compliances, but before that, I will hand it over to Latanja to discuss the company's safety and SAIDI performances.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Displayed here is a graphical representation of the electric utilities safety performance over the past 3 years. As you can see, all of the utilities performed better in 2023 than they did in 2022, and all of the utilities met the safety standards. This slide shows the SAIDI performance over the past 3 years. Similar to the safety performance, all of the utilities performed better than in 2022, for the exception of Delmarva, who performed about the same as they did last year. Last year, their SAIDI was 74, whereas this year, their SAIDI is 75, and all of the utilities also met the SAIDI standards. This slide shows the major outage events that took place in 2023. BGE, SMECO, and PEPCO all experienced one major outage event last year. As we can see to the right, PEPCO's downed wire response performance in the storm falls below the annual requirement to respond to 90% of emergency responder guarded downed wires within 3 hours. They responded to 55% of guarded downed wires within 3 hours. Although PEPCO's downed wire performance during the 2023 major outage event was less than the annual standard requirement, the company did pass the downed wire performance for the 2023 reporting year, with 94% of all government emergency responder guarded down wires being responded to within 180 minutes or 3 hours. During the commissioners' meeting earlier this year, when we discussed the major outage event reports, the commission decided to revisit staff's recommendation during this hearing today. As a reminder, staff recommended that the commission require PEPCO to submit an action plan to address their downed wire response performance, as well as their abandoned call percentage performance during their 2023 storm, which at 10.22% fell short of the annual standard requirement to achieve an average abandoned call percentage rate of 5% or less. I would like to note that in addition to the downed wire response performance, PEPCO also passed the annual abandoned call percentage standard with 2.23% for the year.
All right. As I indicated in my overview presentation, Potomac Edison failed the poorest performing feeder standard in the 2023 reporting period. All electric companies except for SMECO reported poorest performing feeders. However, only Potomac Edison had repeats according to the standard. The standard states that no feeder shall appear in a utility's lists of poorest performing feeder during the 3 consecutive 12-month reporting periods unless the utility has undertaken reasonable remediation measures to improve the performance of the feeder. PE reported that one feeder performed poorly. It's the Ehlers Valley Circuit. The circuit is a 60-mile overhead line that traverses rural, highly vegetated areas in PE service territory, and it serves about 450 customers, 447 to be specific. According to the company, the main reason for the feeder's poor performance continues to be off right-of-way trees, which the company tried to address in the past through several remediation measures, including implementation of tree trimming, sectionalization, and installation of reclosers and fall detectors, although PE learned that they were not effective measures because the feeder performed poorly in 2023 as well. PE provided a corrective action plan that now also includes implementation of a distribution automation scheme, and PE plans to complete the CAP by the end of 2024. If you do not have any questions on this slide, I will hand it over to Chris to discuss PE's customer communication standards.
Just one question. So for SMECO, do you know why they didn't submit any PPFs?
They didn't have a feeder that performed poorly, that met the standard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Christopher Lowe with staff. So 2023 customer communication standards. For all 5 electric companies satisfied the customer communication standards for answering more than 75% of customer calls within 30 seconds for 2023. However, Potomac Edison reported a 5.19% annual abandoned call rate, which means that the company failed to meet the COMAR abandoned call rate standard. According to the company, Potomac Edison experienced difficulties in recruiting and retaining customer service representatives, CSRs, in 2020, in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic. These challenges continued through 2021 and 2022, despite the company increased the wages for new hiring and experienced CSRs. The company filed a corrective action plan that includes hiring 100 additional CSRs and continuing to develop new features and functionalities within their interactive voice response IVR system and other digital channels. So by increasing and retaining the CSR workforce and enhancing the customer self-service experience, the company is confident that the plan will address the call center performance, especially the abandoned call rate, that will hopefully it will exceed the expected performance.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. DeAndre T. Wilson on behalf of staff. According to COMAR 2050-1210, Maryland's Periodic Inspection Standard, each electric company is required to adopt and follow written operation and maintenance procedures for its electric plant in order to maintain safe and reliable electric service. If a utility fails to comply with its O&M programs and has not received a stay of enforcement, the company shall provide a corrective action plan, preferably in its annual performance report, but no later than April 1st. With the exception of BGE, all of the electric companies were in compliance with this standard in 2023. Prior to staff's scheduled 2024 annual records inspection, BGE self-reported that it had missed performing inspections on 5 pad mount transformers located along a couple of the feeders and substation records staff selected this year for inspection. According to BGE, although these inspections were planned for the 2023 calendar year, they were not completed because they were missing from the list of transformers to be inspected. BGE has since completed these missed inspections and has provided staff a copy of the completed records for its review. Since that time, BGE has amended its annual reliability report to denote the missed inspections and has launched an investigation to determine the extent of missed inspections for pad mount transformers and all other equipment, which includes more than 1,500 feeders. At the conclusion of its investigation, the company plans to file a report detailing its findings, followed by a corrective action plan to address any additional missed inspections discovered. The company's investigation is expected to be completed by the end of July, and it will file its report by mid-August. Although BGE promptly completed the inspections for the 5 pad mount transformers it reportedly missed in 2023, 2023 is the 5th year the company has reported missing scheduled periodic inspections after previously reporting missing inspections in 2015, 2016, 2018, and 2019 for similar reasons. In Appendix A of this presentation, you will find a table which details the company's previously reported missed inspections in more detail, the types of equipment for which inspections were missed, and previous corrective actions that have been taken by the company. In the past, BGE has previously submitted corrective action plans that staff has found to be acceptable. But with this incident being its 5th missed inspection in 9 years, staff is concerned that the company continues to have issues with its internal preventative maintenance procedures and systems, which have prevented the company from successfully meeting the periodic equipment inspections standard. Staff recommends that BGE, upon the completion of its investigation, promptly file the results of its investigation with the Commission, along with a cap that details the root cause of the missed inspections, how the company plans to resolve any additional missed inspections, and how it plans to prevent future occurrences. After its review of the results of BGE's investigation and proposed cap or corrective action plan, staff will provide further comments and recommendations, which may include the possibility of recommending a civil penalty.
Right?
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question at this point? Yeah, thanks for your report, and I just wanted to better understand this. Obviously, if Commissioner O'Donnell were here, he'd be very animated right now. This was a big issue for him on the periodic inspections. Is this something that you, in fact, found in your own investigation? That I guess you do a review of the equipment needs to be periodically inspected every year. Is this something you found, or was it self-reported by the company?
It was self-reported. So the annual inspections or equipment inspections entails staff randomly selecting feeders and substations that it would like, whose records it would like to inspect for that particular year for the previous year. During the course of staff notifying the utilities which facilities it would like to inspect, prior to the scheduled inspection date and the due date for the records, the utility notified staff that it did not have, or it self-reported that it had missed the inspections for the particular equipment.
Okay. So So it's through your work, you randomly select these sites, and
Yes.
then it just turns out that the company said, "Oh, we in fact did not periodically inspect." I'm just trying to understand exactly how this works. So, if there are other places that you didn't happen to randomly select in your work, we would know if that there's a missed periodic inspection.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
that's how it occurred.
With RM 79, the requirement now that the companies self-disclose, they self-report, what I mean, is it working? I guess in your view, it's new, but again, it doesn't. It seems like it shouldn't be staff that hopefully just randomly selects a site and then learns at that point that it hasn't been inspected. It seems like the company needs to do more. The companies need to do more to make sure that these inspections are taking place. Is that how you understand this self-reporting is supposed to work?
Well, this is the first year that
Okay.
that we have selected a facility in which a utility reported that it did not have the records to provide for our inspection. Prior to RM 79 promulgating the self-reporting requirement, BGE has had a record of self-reporting missed inspections in the past. So the years in which I detailed that they had missed inspections were of the utility reporting that they had missed those inspections. I think RM 79 was just an opportunity for staff to codify the self-reporting because it was understood just based on our relationship with the utilities and pretty much an honor system that they would be self-reporting any missed inspections. So RM 79 is just simply codifying that self-reporting requirement.
Okay. All right. Maybe at some point I can also just better understand this offline, but I was interested in the narrative that went into how staff, I guess, randomly selects. Is this how it's been done in the past as well? That in the past you randomly selected sites and then you learned, the company realized at that point that they had not done their periodic inspection?
Yes, we've always randomly selected
Okay.
facilities. Of course, we've got tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of facilities. So it's pretty much a random selection.
So for the last 5 years, staff has you've just happened to come across randomly sites that had not been gone through their periodic inspections.
Yes, 2023, this year denotes the first time that we have encountered facilities that we requested to be inspected that had not been inspected and self-reported by the utility.
It almost seems okay.
No, so just for clarification, prior years this had never happened. This denotes the first time that a utility, that we've selected a facility
Oh, okay.
that a utility has self-reported not having the records for us to inspect.
Okay.
So all the facilities that we've checked or requested records for prior to this year, they've had the records, all the utilities have had the records available to provide for our inspection.
Okay. And okay. So you've got a record with BG, and you're pretty confident that the other utilities are complying, and that you've received, I guess, the records you need to know that the periodic inspections have taken place.
The utility, right? The facilities that we have requested records for from other utilities have provided those records.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Commissioner Sussman.
Good morning, Mr. Wilson. So you're going to be getting, you said by the end of July, so today's the end of July. So you're going to be getting a report from BG about the issues around having failed to do the inspections in a timely fashion. Is that what you're expecting? And then an explanation of why that happened?
We're expecting the utility to find the root cause of the missed inspections and also any additional missed inspections that it may find based on this investigation. and a corrective action plan as to how it plans to address those missed facilities and the preventative measures it will take to prevent it from occurring in the future.
Okay, and at this point, you have, there's nothing that you are aware of that sort of points to a problem or something that the commission would need to address in terms of inspections?
The issues that we've seen based on this missed inspection and the previous ones with BGE has been somewhat similar in regards to human error, and the integration of a new software asset management system. So staff is, we're expecting the utility to provide us with additional information in regards to its investigation as to those systems and these causes and how it will have a preventative measure in addressing those so that they do not continue to be an issue.
Okay, and we won't, the commission won't be looking at this issue again for another year. Unless you come back to us and ask for some sort of penalty or some action that needs to be taken against BGE. Is that correct?
Yes, we're waiting for the utility to provide us with a corrective action plan that we can review and analyze and make a determination if we feel the plan is acceptable, and we can provide further recommendations or direction to the commission based on our review of that plan.
Okay, because to the extent that there is a problem or a challenge, I mean, that's certainly something that we would want to know about and be able to help to address. I mean, you know, maybe you need sort of biannual reporting from them or something other than what they're doing now. Because the concern I have is that I don't want us to wait for another year and then for you to come back and tell us, well, the situation still hasn't been addressed. So to the extent that there's something that we can do to make sure that all of these facilities are being sort of looked at, and that there's nothing that's sort of falling through the cracks, that's actually sort of an important thing.
Since the utility has provided that they've missed these inspections, since they've self-reported, staff has had extensive discussions with the utility as to what our expectations are moving forward and details as to how they are planning to move forward with their investigation. So we are expecting, based on our review of our extensive review of the corrective action plan they want to provide, we want to make sure that they're taking the necessary steps to address what we see as a root, what we see as a consistent issue with the inspections and any additional measures that they may be taking. And from there, staff could probably make a determination if we want some more extensive reporting outside of what is already being done.
Right. So that's actually that's very, very good to hear. I guess my concern is that it's happened in the past, and so we just want to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. So thank you for your presentation on this.
Yes.
And I look forward to the findings of staff on this.
Okay, any other questions?
This is for staff overall.
No,
Well, I guess,
Oh, okay.
do you have another?
Yeah, we just want to provide a conclusion and recommendations. So, in conclusion, of the 11 performance standards, eight of them were met or exceeded in the 2023 reporting period. Potomac Edison, as we discussed earlier, failed the poorest performing feeder standard and the customer communication standard and provided corrective action plans. Staff finds both corrective action plans to be reasonable and recommends that the commission approves the caps. BGE failed the periodic equipment inspection standard, as DeAndre indicated earlier. BGE has not yet provided a corrective action plan and still investigating the extent of the missed inspections. So staff recommends that BGE provides promptly the investigation results as well as corrective action plans as soon as they conclude their investigations. As required by the commission, in order number 9078982, which is the Commission order on the last annual reliability reports, both PE and BGE provided action plans to improve their major outage event performance. BGE was specifically required to improve its downwire response performance in their action plan, and they indicated that they plan to increase their resource capacity by 20%, depending on the severity of the incident. PE also provided an action plan on how they plan to address and improve downwire response and availability of qualified line personnel, and the overusage of the unknown outage cause category during major outage events. PE lists trainings and plans to augment line worker staff through apprenticeship to help improve their performance during major outage events. Staff concludes that both PE and BGE completed their corrective action plans for 2022 and recommends that the Commission accept both plans. Regarding major outage event reports filed with the Commission, as Latanja indicated earlier, both BGE, SMECO, and PEPCO experienced major outage events in their service territories in the 2023 reporting period. Staff recommends that the Commission accept SMECO's and BGE's major outage event reports. Staff recommends that BGE continues to improve its availability of qualified line personnel during major outage events. Regarding PEPCO, staff recommends that the Commission require the company to provide a plan to address its downwire response and abundant coal performances during major outage events. Staff also recommends that PEPCO includes in its plan lessons learned from the July 28th storm. Staff will continue to monitor in these annual reports BGE's underground fault detector pilot program, BGE's performance regarding the periodic equipment inspection standards. We will also monitor the SEDIMED metrics until a more comprehensive and resilience matrices are developed and approved by the Commission. Staff has reviewed BGE's multiple device activation corrective action plan from the 2022 reporting period, and we conclude that it's acceptable. As directed by the Commission, staff is leading a COMA revisions work group to revise the service interruption and downwire response standards and introduce new requirements related to availability of qualified line personnel. Staff is preparing a work group report, and we will share that when it is available. Regarding wildfire mitigation plans, only SMECO indicated that they do have specific wildfire mitigation plan. All other companies indicated that they manage wildfires in their emergency operations plan or in their major outage event plan. PE indicated that First Energy just formed an internal task force to assess the current mitigation, monitoring, and response capabilities regarding wildfires, and that the analysis is currently underway. PE plans to integrate recommendations put forward by the task force. Finally, staff recommends that the Commission approve the annual reliability reports and revisions, and that concludes staff's presentation. We're all available for any questions.
Okay, so any questions? Commissioner Kutcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you for that report, and I think overall this is, I think the report overall indicates that reliability has, I think, significantly improved in Maryland over the years I've been here, and also it looks like we're in a good trajectory as far as stabilization. So overall, I look at this as a very positive report. I did want to go back, though, to I guess the storm of July 28th, August 1st, 2023. You indicated in the PEPCO service territory that there was a concern, well, actually, they did not meet the standard for down wire and also for the customer response, I guess the call abandonment rate. You made an indication that this is kind of similar to 2018, that you did not get, I guess, an adequate response from PEPCO as far as lessons learned. Is that correct? Am I reading the narrative correctly? And is there something that we should specifically do? I mean, I think you're asking us to ask for a corrective action plan, but is there something that you think we need to focus in on this particular storm and the failure on the downed wire and again responding to customer calls.
Thank you, Commissioner Richard, and I will let Latanja add to my response. But as you indicated, we believe that Pepco did not adequately perform with regards to the downwire response and the customer communication standards. And although for the year they didn't fail the standard, we believe that they could provide an action plan on how they can better respond to their customers during this major outage event. So that's what we're looking to get from the utility on, specific plans on how you plan to address downwire response, customer communication, and just, what are the lessons you learned from responding to the past event.
And I think she adequately answered. I would have said the same thing.
Okay, great, yeah. Obviously, it's when we're having these major events, it's when it's, an emergency,
Right.
when we need to make sure that, we're responding to customers that may be in distress. And obviously, during these events when the wires are going to come down, so
Right.
it's important we make sure our neighborhoods are safe during these events. So, I appreciate your highlighting that and making the recommendation you did that we further require Pepco to provide, I guess, the lessons learned. So that's something we'll definitely discuss, I'm sure, when we review the reports. So thank you.
Commissioner Schlichtman.
So to follow up from Commissioner Richards' questions, once you get the lessons learned from Pepco, what will happen between now and next year when we have sort of the annual review? Is there some process in place that will allow staff to work with Pepco to review the lessons learned to make sure that the down-wired percentage rates are not as low as they were for the July storm?
Right. So, once the lessons learned and the action plan is filed with us, if we had any questions, we will follow up with the company. And what we would like to see in the next year's report is those actions that the company implements those plans in any subsequent, storm responses. So that ideally, that's what we would like to see.
Okay, but is there any, so that's sort of actions that the company will take based on what they tell you. But is there a process for you to review the lessons learned and then to be able to communicate to Pepco, well, this is not quite enough, we're expecting you to do more, or we're expecting you to do something different?
Once it's filed, I believe we have an opportunity to send data requests, to have a discussion with the company, to express how, if we believe it adequately addresses staff's concerns. I think, we've had good relationships with the companies. Whenever, something is filed, if we have issues with anything or questions, we would have, opportunities to iron those out through discussions.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Barbe. Actually, you're on mute. Yeah, we can't hear you. No, still not working. It was on earlier. What's that? Okay. We're actually going to call you, so just hold on for a second.
There we go.
Okay, so I have a question about the customer communication performance. Specifically, PE has twice the drop rate as everyone else. I lost a little bit of audio, so maybe you explain this, but I was wondering if you could comment on that.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part of the question.
I just want to know if there's an explanation for PE having twice the abandoned call rate.
Oh, okay. According to the company, because the PE has some difficulties during the COVID pandemic, specifically, they had trouble retaining or recruiting new customer service representatives during those periods. And their plan is to hire 100 additional CSRs to address that problem. So hopefully they can increase the call taking capacity in order to improve that abandoned call rate.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So next we're going to move on to the Exelon Utilities, BG&E, Pepco, and Delmarva. So, do we have slides for you guys, or?
No. No.
Oh, okay. All right. So, all right. Why don't we start with BG&E? So.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. Beverly Sikora on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. I also have Michael Butts, who's our Director of Engineering, with me today. Thank the Commission for this opportunity to talk a little bit more about our performance this year, and Mr. Butts will be explaining a little bit more of about what happened with our inspection. So I will turn it over to Mr. Butts.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'll start off with a positive about our reliability last year. As you saw in the charts, it did improve significantly. There's a number of process improvements we put in place, and we're actually doing very well this year, and we're very much below our target. So I'm hoping that by the end of this year, you're going to see another drop in our number of interruptions to customers and improvement in reliability. So that's a positive. However, I do want to have most of my comments on the missed inspections for you, and I imagine there's a lot of questions about that. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through a process of giving you some background as to how we do the inspections, what happened, why did we miss them. I'll give you an idea of the scope. We missed them, so what does that mean? How many was it? And then we're going to talk about the corrective actions. Now, as of a couple of days ago, I did get the report of our investigation. At the time that we had talked with staff, we didn't have that report completed yet, so you're actually going to hear some information that staff hasn't heard yet either. This is the latest, okay? But first, to start you off, how does the process work? Well, at BGE, we have an asset management system. It's just an IT system. It's called AS8 or Asset Suite 8. All utilities have these types of systems. This system is what we call a system of record, meaning that if there is something in the field, like a transformer, and that transformer is active, we would expect that transformer's data is in this system of record, right? Or that's our asset management system. So when we do inspections, every year we would run a report out of that asset system. We get a list of the devices to be inspected, and then we go about and do those inspections. And that's exactly what happened in 2022. late 2022, we ran a report for 2023. We got our list and we inspected everything on that report. 100% of what was out of that asset management system was inspected. What we didn't know at the time, and this is what we found out a few weeks ago, is that there were cases where something was installed in the field, but that device had not made its way to the asset system. And because that asset system is our system of record, it didn't show up on our inspection report. Therefore, we were just blind to it. We didn't know it existed. And that's why we missed it. So what happened is that when the staff came to us and they did their annual inspection, they picked some feeders and they say, okay, let's see the inspection records. We dug into that. That's when we found that there were 5 transformers that were not in the asset system, but were sitting in our, what we call a GIS system. And I'll explain that in a minute. And as soon as we heard that, we found that out. We said, well, that's not meeting the guidelines, so we self-reported that to staff. And me personally, as a director, what I did is I said, okay, if we have 5 on those feeders, we very well could have a lot more on other feeders. So I said, I want you to go and find out if we have other missed inspections on other feeders. So we call that an extent of condition. That study was completed as of a couple of days ago. I saw the results, and I'd like to share those results with you. Okay. We have a total of about, and we'll have exact numbers in the report for you, about 650 inspections that were not completed. We have about 750 other locations where we need to inspect in the field to see if there's actually devices there. That could add to that number. I don't expect all of them are going to be missed inspections. You know, if I had to say what I think the general number is going to end up being, probably something around 1,000 is going to be where we're going to end up. So that's what happened. So why did it happen? There are 2 primary reasons. And 90% of it has to do with this first reason, and that is there is a mismatch between our GIS system and our asset system. Now, I'll explain what the asset system is, so let me explain GIS. GIS is basically an electronic map of our entire service territory. It has all of our equipment, has all of our circuits and wires and cable and transformers and all of that, right? When somebody wants to change the system, we'll have a designer go in there and they'll create a design in that system. A construction will then build according to that design. And then when they're done, they say, okay, I've finished. They want to hit the button, and all those assets that were changed, they're supposed to get transferred over to the system of record or the asset system. What we found is that in some cases, that transfer didn't occur. And that's why we have these, something close to 1,000 could be where we end up, that haven't showed up. So that was the primary root cause. There's not this reconciliation between those 2 systems. Okay. The second cause has to do with our feeder inspections, and this was human error. We have project managers that manage this. They actually do it through a spreadsheet list of all the feeders. A few years ago, we had determined that a number of those feeders had already been inspected. We took them off the list because we didn't want to duplicate it, but we never added the feeders back in, and therefore they got missed in future inspections. So those are the 2 primary reasons. And you'll see this when it comes out in the report. So we've identified what the root cause is. Okay. So what's the scope of that? Like, what does that mean? So, you know, if they say 1,000 records, right? Well, to give you an idea, every year BGE inspects over 100,000 devices. So it is roughly about 1% is what we're talking about here. Now, obviously, 1% is not good enough. We want to be perfect, right? We don't want to have any misinspecting. But if you're thinking of it in terms of impact overall, 1% is a fairly low number compared to the total that we do every year. So that's the scope. Now I want to talk about the corrective actions and what we're going to do. The first thing is that every one of those missed inspections, every one of those field locations that we have to go out and verify, that's all going to get done by the end of this year. So we will be caught up by the end of the year on all of that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, whenever you have a problem like this, where there's this reconciliation problem between one system or another system, or if you can have human error, right, you want to have a control in place to make sure that you're identifying that. That's what we didn't have. We did not have a control that made sure that our GIS system what was installed in the field matched our asset system. So we will be developing that control, and we plan to run that control multiple times during the year. It's not just going to be the one time, it's going to be multiple times now where we're going to be reconciling between those two systems. That's the first thing. That in and of itself would solve the problem, except that over time you can have people change, right? Maybe they can forget the system, or you can have IT systems change, and that report that you ran before maybe doesn't work so well anymore, right? So the second part of this is that we're going to have leadership accountability that we didn't have before, and we have this process called a seasonal readiness process. This is where we have very specific tasks that we have to perform before every summer and winter season in order to prepare for those hot and cold weather times. We are going to be adding to our winter readiness in preparation for the following year the running of these reports, the review with myself as the director of the company, and then these actions that take place, they have to get approved by not just me. They get approved by my boss, the vice president, and they get approved by her boss, the COO or chief operating officer. So these actions now going forward are going to go all the way up to our COO for approval, that we've had this reconciliation occur between these systems. That's something that did not exist before. The CAP plan that I talked about, that is going to be coming out in mid-August. It'll have all this information. There's a lot more actually actions than what I'm talking about here. These are sort of the high-level actions. And then I think I got one more thing that I'll make, and then I'll turn it over to you for questions, because I'm sure you might have some, is that IT systems can change over time, and you can just have coding, right? So we're just not going to assume that the report we made today, this reconciliation report, is going to work tomorrow. Part of our annual review is going to be sure that we haven't changed these systems such that the reports don't even work anymore. And then maybe there's one more thing I'll add to this, is that by documenting this into our seasonal readiness process, it doesn't matter if people change, right? I could leave, another leader can come in, a staff person can leave, and another person can come in. It doesn't matter. Those same actions have to be completed, and they have to get approved up through the COO. So we're not going to lose the fact that this has to get done, regardless of who's in these positions. So that's real high level, what happened, why it happened, and what our corrective actions are. Again, a lot more coming out in the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so any questions? Commissioner Suchman.
Morning, Mr. Butson. Thank you for your presentation. And that answered some of my questions. I mean, the challenge, of course, is 1,000 devices were not inspected, and it's very hard to know in terms of scale, you know, were these devices that if they failed could have brought the system down. I mean, we won't know. And maybe you know, but on some level, it almost doesn't matter that there was a sort of a failure in the system, and so it's I like the sort of the actions that you've identified. I guess the question is for me and then for staff. When you do the reconciling of the GIS and the assets system, and you'll do it sort of multiple times, is that something that you would be willing to just provide staff to just let them know, you know, if you're doing it quarterly, you know, just to let you know, we've just done the reconciliation, everything sort of checks out. It just as a way to give staff comfort and then us comfort that you're in the process of making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And so, and then I'm not sure that the seasonal readiness can offer that same kind of sort of quarterly reporting, but to the extent that you can provide that kind of information, particularly because it sounds like this wasn't the first time this has happened, that it's happened before, and I don't know why there was a problem in the last time. It sounds like you've identified the problems this time going forward, but just so that we have some comfort, reliability is really important, and so to the extent that to the extent we can stay on top of it by getting this information from you, that I think would be a big help.
Sure, yeah, I can comment on that. I have no concern whatsoever with being transparent about our reporting. So the staff will be more than happy to do that if that's what staff would like. So.
Okay, well, perhaps in the August filing, if you can offer a suggested time frame for filing, that's something that we can kind of look at, staff can look at, make determination about whether that's enough or that sort of meets the concerns that they may have and that I certainly have.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today and for your report. I mean, that is very reassuring to hear what you are doing. We'll be interested once the staff have a chance to look at the report and come back with with their recommendations. We can kind of proceed from there. But given that this has been a multiple year issue for BGE, and generally you perform so well everywhere else, but we've had this problem, multiple years. In fact, you've even paid a fine in the past for this problem. So can you tell me, from what you've just described as your corrective action plan, what you're going to be doing, what is different this year so that we can be reassured that this time you think you're going to be on top of this problem? Yeah. And because again, we've had these reports for multiple years in a row, and yet we're back again talking about the same issue.
Yep. I would say this is that if you look at the past action plans, they were good for a point in time. What we didn't have though was a process to make sure that they were good as you went throughout the years, and IT systems changed and people changed and things like that. That was the issue. The other thing is, I'll point out, is that this particular problem that we're dealing with recently, this is actually a new problem for us that we haven't seen before, which is this reconciliation between GIS and our asset system. So we didn't realize there was that problem. This is new, we found out. Now we have to put a control in place to correct it. So that's the first thing that's different, is that we're going to have a process in place that if people change, process change, IT systems change, we're going to be reviewing it annually to make sure that all of our processes that are in place still work, because they can get out of date if you're not careful about that. So hope that helps.
Yes, it does. And also, the fact that you went back and you discovered some of these issues. Are you working with the other Exelon utilities, both in Maryland and in other states, just to be assured that other utilities aren't also having this same problem? Maybe they weren't picked up at this point, but it is a concern I have that again, we make sure that we're learning from this problem, and that we're not somehow missing the same problem in other places.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the actions, and I didn't mention it here in my opening remarks, but you'll see it in the final report, is that we will be talking to our peer utilities. Particularly, our focus is going to be those utilities that haven't had a problem. What are their processes?
Or don't think they have a problem. Well, that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, yeah, but I can't comment on that, obviously.
Yeah, right.
But if they haven't had a problem, though, maybe they have very robust processes that we can learn from and we can implement ourselves. So that's part of our corrective action.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Barbe.
I don't have any questions.
So you're good, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I don't have any questions.
Oh.
There.
Right. Well, thank you very much. We're glad we can hear you. I have a question about something that might be a topic on next year's report. With all this reporting about the possibility we're going to have a more intense hurricane season, and given the fact that it's been, quite a while since we've actually had a significant hurricane event, does the company have private weather information systems, or you just rely on the National Weather Service?
No, we actually have providers that we engage. And in fact, not just for hurricanes, by the way. This is a daily report that comes out from our weather providers. I see that actually because I'm one of several leads that would operate a storm in the storm center. We had opportunities to talk with them when storms are coming, particularly with hurricanes. We get several days advance notice, and we'd be tracking it all along through our own providers, not just the Weather Service.
And you obviously, I guess you haven't dusted these off in a while, but you have the plan for getting outside help and all that situation when you have to sort of bring people in.
Yeah, and in fact, while obviously in a hurricane, you tend to bring in a lot of outside help, right? But we're not unpracticed at doing that. Even with some of our larger storms, thunderstorms, we will sometimes bring in outside help that requires staging areas and logistics and things like that. So we get a chance to practice that as well.
Okay. And just as a heads up for PEPCO and PE and SMECO, I'll want similar sort of information from you guys. So if you want to incorporate it into your presentation, that's great, or I'll just ask about it when we get done. But otherwise, thank you very much. So, Ms. Beckham?
Okie dokie. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Taylor Beckham here on behalf of Potomac Electric Power Company and Delmarva Power and Light. I have 3 main points that I'd like to just chat with you about before we open it up for questions. And for the first 2 points, I'll be probably referring to Delmarva and PEPCO as PHI, so interchangeably. But for the last one, I'll speak specifically to PEPCO, in particular the corrective action plan that staff is recommending based off of the end of July, early August storm. The first point is related to the Mayfi performance that a few parties, or I think primarily OPC, talked to in terms of saying our Mayfi, our momentary outage frequency has been increased. And I wanted to say the reason for that is really as the company has invested in grid automation and increased the installation of reclosers, outages that would have typically been sustained are now momentary. So that's why you might see the Mayfi metric go up, but you are seeing our safety metrics go down. And I do just want to highlight, as what we saw in staff's presentation, PHI has met and or exceeded all of the service quality and reliability requirements. So to the discussion about CME that we also saw OPC talk to, I just want to highlight that there was a change in the CME definition. So what you saw, the old definition would count any customer who experienced more than N interruptions, versus the new definition not only accounts for all CME customers experiencing N or more. So there's an added category there. So our CME metric, it looks different, but it's due to this different or this updated definition. And to the specific point about the storm that PEPCO experienced July 28th to August 1, I just want to kind of take a step back. So the last major outage event that PEPCO experienced was in 2018. And then in 2019, there was actually a change, and this is particular to that guarded down wire metric. It used to be a 4-hour response time. It changed in 2019 to a 3-hour response time. And then there's the MED, the major event day definition that was adopted in 2020. And then in 2023, we had the storm. So the July 28th and 29th storm, that contributed 2 of our 3 major event days. And we had essentially 2 storms on the system at the same time. So before we could call that first storm off, that second storm rolled in. And what that means for what we see with that guarded down wire metric is there was a need for mutual assistance that was not yet available because we were still trying to assess the larger outages from that first wave, if you will. And then there was also just kind of to drill down on this assist fire police metric that we're looking at. During that storm, there were 11 calls. 6 of those calls we were able to respond to within 3 hours. 3 were responded to in greater than 3 hours, but less than 8 hours. And then 2 were responded to in that greater than 8-hour window. Those 5 calls that were post or after that 3-hour metric were primarily related to, again, we're looking at this mutual assistance issue, but also there was a lot of access issues. There was a lot of major trees and wires in the area that would have made accessibility challenging and thus extended that response time. After every storm, PEPCO and PHI does conduct a lessons learned, and we're very open to being transparent and working through that. But to the question regarding like how a corrective action plan, we can work with staff. We're happy to always work with staff. We find working with staff is very, very beneficial. But again, the last major event was in 2018. We met this metric we exceeded this metric for the annual reporting, which was 94%. Up until another storm, that's when we'll, have to respond and see how we do. But again, each storm is unique. In this case, this was a unique storm in that we had 2 storms on the system, so that certainly impacts our response time. So I will stop there. I have with me Aaron Smith, our Director of Engineering, as well as other members from the team, and we're happy to answer any questions. And Commissioner or Chairman Hoover, I think we can talk to your question. Kind of started talking about it with that mutual assistance aspect related to this 2023 storm, but I'm sure we can speak to more about that, but happy to have that question refreshed.
Okay, question for PEPCO, Commissioner Suchman.
Mr. Butts first. See, the problem is you're sitting there, and so you're still subject to our questioning. Can you give us a sense of how many days elapsed between the day the inspections were due and the day they were completed? I mean, I'm assuming there are still some inspections that are not done, because you said you were going to finish the inspections. So, and I'm asking because I'm asking for the 1,000. You don't have to answer that now, but you will have to answer it. So can you provide us with information, maybe in terms of what inspections you've done, when the inspections were due, and then when they were completed, and then maybe a sort of a sense of what you have left. If it's an onerous request, let us know. I don't want you to spend thousands of man hours on this.
No, I think that's a reasonable request. We know when inspections were due, and we know when we're going to complete them, so I think we could put that together for
Okay.
you. I don't have it off the top of my head, though.
Okay, that's good. But I do have some PEPCO questions. And relating to the last issue about and this is the staff is recommending sort of a lessons learned, and I guess so it was interesting to know that there were 2 storms and that you couldn't really sort of activate mutual assistance because you're sort of dealing with the second storm when you got the first storm. But I guess, and I know that you're still working on the lessons learned, but sort of now that you've there's a year that has passed, is there something that PEPCO could have done better? Because what I'm hearing from you is sort of an explanation about why you didn't do better. But sort of a year of analysis later, are there things that you could have done better, or things that you'd like to implement that can help you to avoid the downed wire situation, the call situation?
Sure, and one thing, like I said, it was a unique situation, and where there's accessibility issues, I'm not so sure that, that kind of, we have to deal with it as we can. But one thing that, as I understand it, I invite my colleagues here to rip me down if I'm going off the rail here over my skis, but, we do communicate with these emergency personnel, and that's particularly what this metric is related to, our wire watchers getting out there and relieving them of them guarding these down wires, and they will give us some direction in terms of prioritization. And so perhaps they're looking at, as we're prioritizing, what can we get to quickly, what can we not get to quickly, as well as what do they want us to do. So that can contribute to it, and I think looking at that in future instances. I know also, as I understand it, when we're getting the mutual assistance crews in, they are not immediately able to be deployed. They have to, dependent upon where they're coming from, they might have to have some level of training, depending upon, where we are, I guess, in our overall, I guess, staging of the storm. They have to be bedded. There's different things that have to happen. So maybe in that transition, seeing if we can get them out there quicker or how we do that process. And I think, you know, we're always open to a level of refresher training because there are two different ways that we can code this metric as in terms of the assist fire police versus just wires down, and making sure that everyone's working off the same sheet of music in terms of coding and making sure that, you know, if you get a call in that's an assist police fire, which I think we're doing a good job of trying to make sure that we know that this is that type of metric, making sure that everyone, including our mutual assistance crews, is aware of what needs to be done and what needs to be prioritized. But I will also turn to Aaron and see if there's anything there that I may have.
Sure. Not much to add. And good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I will say that everything that Taylor mentioned in terms of just our overall response, you know, with our crews and mutual assistance, what we can do is really take a hard look at the number of available mutual assistance crews, which we do typically during storms. But then in combination to that, I think one of the things we can take a look at is just crew availability of crews that we have currently on the system. I think a lot will come out in our lessons learned in terms of just a better process, but there are a couple of different things that are on the table. I think you don't want to go too far to the left when I say crew availability, having too many crews on the system and not having their rest to address other issues, but then at the same time, you don't want to have too little. So I think it's meeting in the middle, and I will say that, you know, in terms of working with our emergency response team within PHI, we will look at those lessons learned and then try to develop a more comprehensive game plan.
So is there, I should know this, but is there a database for mutual assistance, particularly where you have sort of multiple storms hitting at the same time, so you've got crews that are sort of needed in lots of different places? Is there sort of a database and clearinghouse in terms of sort of assigning, you know, crews to different regions?
So in terms of a database, you know, I'm kind of a little foggy on that because it's been a couple of years since I've been in that position. I will say that it is a judgment call that our system incident commander makes. They'll look at the storm flag, they'll identify the number of outages that we have on the system, and as well as crew availability, and then they'll make the determination, do we need to reach out to external and internal utilities to see about, you know, additional mutual assistance. From there, we reach out, like let's just say FPNL, Florida Light and Power.
Right.
We may reach out to them, right, and see if they have crew availability. They'll tell us how many crews they have on the system that they could send up for a particular incident, and then we will, in close coordination with them, identify basically you have so many crews that could potentially be deployed to the PEPCO region, and then we'll reach out to other utilities, but then from there, there's constant communication. They may identify that they have 20 crews that can be deployed. Oftentimes what we found is that based on that 20, that initial 20, there's still a lot of communication that has to take place between that initial reach out and the time that we actually receive the crews. And so there's a lot of just back and forth communication, but in terms of
So you actually have to contact the individual
we
utilities.
have to contact
Okay.
individual utilities for each instance, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Barbe.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. First, I think it's a vast improvement, the fact that this time you do recognize that there is a need for lessons learned, and that there can be lessons learned, because that's a big difference from 2018. I think that's what kind of got our attention when you said there weren't any lessons learned. So I think that's important that we're starting at this point. Since 2018, I mean, as you pointed out, Ms. Beckham, that there were some enhancements to the downed wire requirements, and because of the concern, I think, expressed by first responders throughout the state, one, and then also by the commission, that this is something that was important that be addressed. So I think, you know, given that, you know, when you have these these lines, these down lines that have been called in, and we have other first responders, who are basically doing the job of the utility and watching the line, waiting for the utility to get there. I think that is very important that we recognize that it's important that whether firefighters, police, or others are able to go off and do their job, and that the utility is able to, mind the line and hopefully address it as quickly as possible. So again, I just kind of, remember going through a few of these hearings, and hopefully that part of the history is remembered, and that again in this as you review lessons learned, that we can figure out how we make sure that we meet this new standard, and we don't see another something that's falling as short as 55% when we're trying to get to a 90% level. So I think probably enough said, unless you have any more comment on that. I thought the explanation it's understandable, but again, I think we want to make sure that we do in fact hit that 90% because it's important. It's an emergency situation, and we need to make sure we keep your customers, our constituents safe, and that we free up the other first responders to do their jobs.
But yeah, that's exactly right. And we certainly recognize that. I mean, we met the annual standard, which is
Correct.
what and exceeded the annual standard. And for that specific storm, certainly can look at what can be improved to make sure that we increase that 55%. I think what was striking for me when I was going back and looking at this is that it was 11 calls, and it was 6. We were able to get to 6 of them within that 3 hours, but there's still those open 5, and really being able to drill down into why we couldn't get to those 5. And so there's different, obviously unique situations that happen, but again, knowing that we have that data and knowing that we can look at it, that certainly will contribute to figuring out how we can get that metric up.
Great, that's good to hear from you. I did want to understand also, in talking about the abandoned call, during the same storm, it seemed the company also was not able to meet the standard for the customer response, the ability. Is that, do you have anything that you can tell us now about why that happened, and is this also something you're looking at to make sure that, again, during these emergencies, that that's not the time when we're not meeting the standard? It's great we can meet them during blue sky periods,
Right.
but it's obviously people in distress need to be able to reach the company.
Yeah, so we can certainly get back to you with more information, but I think the high-level point is, as it relates to, and I think that metric was particularly related to reaching out to our vulnerable population prior to the storm. PEPCO attempted to meet 100% of the vulnerable individuals prior to the storm. It's just that 76% live answer rate is what we weren't able to have either a live person or voicemail situation. So for that, we can certainly look into why that live response rate was down. I don't know if that's particularly what you're...
I guess maybe I'm talking more about the abandoned call percentage. Are we talking about the reaching to vulnerable populations, or are these the abandoned calls, people attempting to reach the company and were not able to get any response? Therefore did not continue trying to reach PEPCO because they were not having any success.
Right. My understanding was that was the vulnerable population. We can take that back. I don't know if there's any... we can take that back and get back to you on that one.
Okay, yeah, if I may give a clarification, just as I'm kind of made notes to myself going through all the filings, it looked like it was the abandoned call standard that it was supposed to be 5% or less, but in fact it was 10.2%. 10.2% during the period of the storm.
Okay.
The July 28th through August 1st, 2023 storm. And that could be also, again, something you report to staff too, as you're going through, again, lessons learned. Other than that, I don't have any more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So related to the down wire situation, do you actually have to have somebody go out to the specific place where the wire's down to de-energize it, or is there a way to de-energize the wire remotely?
It's not necessarily that you have to have someone to de-energize the wire. You just have to go and relieve one of those APF personnel that are in the vicinity of that down wire that gives us that response time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess
And
what we
it's a trained person from our our company that knows and understands about live wires and what to do around those type of situations.
that's what I was going to say. Just they're a wire watcher that we have to get out there.
And so when you were going through the list, you said there was a couple of situations where you couldn't get to it because of downed trees and things like that. I mean, is there any problems with, you communicating with the local governments about, hey, we have this down wire here, but we can't, get there because there's a tree across the road, and coordinating that aspect of it?
I do understand that we are in communication consistently during these events with the emergency personnel, such that it can go so far as they're giving us priority kind of guidance,
Right.
if you will. So to that end, I would expect that, that communication in terms of, hey, we can't get out there because of accessibility issues, I would expect would be happening. So that communication is there.
Okay. All right, and then back to my question that I asked for BG&E. I mean, what weather service do you have? A private contractor like BG&E does, or you just rely on the National Weather Service?
Very, very similar to BGE because we are one Exelon company. We do have private providers that provide us with information on a daily basis that updates us on the activity, storm activity. Of course, we get a lot of information that comes in from the National Weather Service as well, but that private entity helps us also with identifying the proximity to our infrastructure of any storms.
Okay, all right. So,
Mr. Chairman,
oh, wait a
Mr. Chairman, I
minute.
thought-
Commissioner Barbie, go ahead.
Well, yeah, thank you. And I didn't see this directly in any of the testimony, and I hadn't heard anybody comment on this. So forgive me if this is an unfair question to ask. Maybe you can get back to us later. But I didn't really see any analysis of undergrounded wires versus traditional wires. And I did see some references in the documentation to error detection in underground wires. I'm just curious if you do an analysis comparing the two and what the numbers look like. And if you don't have the answer off the top of your head, I totally understand that. Perhaps you can get back to us.
So just to be clear, are you looking for a cost type of analysis or just overall benefit analysis in terms of just the reliability, overhead versus underground?
Let's start with an overall benefit analysis. I understand that undergrounding is really very, very expensive compared to traditional overhead wires, but I'm just curious to know, and I remember when I was talking to people who live in Rockville and Gaithersburg, I was always curious to know what the difference is in reliability between those two.
Got it. I think we can get back to you. I will say, just in terms of my experience working within PHI, we've done some analysis in the past, and probably, as you probably know, undergrounding is a lot more expensive, basically due to the labor. It's a lot more labor intensive in terms of building trenches and just the work that is involved. In terms of the reliability, we do see increased reliability, but in terms of duration, oftentimes when you have an underground event, it's much more difficult to pinpoint versus an overhead event. So,
Look, if you've already done some semblance of this study, I don't want you to reinvent the wheel or spend a tremendous amount of time of this. Perhaps you can just send to me the analysis you've all done in the past, and I could read that offline. And if I have more questions, and I can follow up with it. I do not want to give you a gigantic homework assignment here.
I think we can look in our records and identify some analysis we've done. And having been part of primarily, so I was the manager of the DC Plug program, the DC Power Line Undergrounding Initiative. We did some analysis there, and that was based on the derecho event that we had back in 2012, where we performed analysis. Where we performed analysis underground versus overhead.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so you want to move on to Delmarva?
Well, the same thing is for Delmarva. certainly available for questions. I think the points about the Mayfie and the CME are the same, but obviously the PEPCO
So-
cap plan is.
Any questions about the Delmarva part? And I take it Delmarva, since PHI does this, also gets the same private weather service.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That works. Thank you very much. Guess now we'll turn to Potomac Edison.
All right, I'm gonna zoom it for you.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Jessica Reba on behalf of the Potomac Edison Company. With me today is Renee Tenney, Director of Engineering, Dave Bedard, Manager of Engineering Services, and Matt Green, our Director of Customer Contact Centers. Our team's going to walk through just a very brief presentation highlighting some aspects of our report and hopefully provide some more detail on the items that were raised earlier in staff's presentation. I think Ms. Tenney is going to kick us off, so I will turn it over to her.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about our 2023 reliability performance. So we do have some slides that we're displaying on the screen, and this slide is really just demonstrating the COMAR requirements and how we have performed over history. And in particular, I want to point out our SAFE and SAIDI performance with meeting the COMAR requirements for the last 4 years.
I can take this one.
Do you want to go ahead to the next slide?
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
it's up. Sorry. Sorry. He's running slides, and I'm trying to figure out which slide he's on. So, apologize. This is also another slide demonstrating our SAIDI and SAFE performance historically, and just reiterating the fact that we have met the requirements over the last 4 years. And before we go over to the next slide, I did want to just go ahead and address the weather question.
Sure.
Since you're going to ask anyway.
Right.
So we do have at First Energy in-house meteorologists that monitor weather, as well as they utilize, of course, external resources. But our in-house meteorologists focus specifically on our territories.
Okay. Thank you.
So I am going to turn it over to my colleague Dave Bedard here.
Good morning.
To
So the next item I wanted to talk about was our service restoration and guarded down wire performance. So in 2023, we achieved 93% of restoration of customers within 8 hours or less during normal conditions, compared to the standard of 92%. And then in 2023, Potomac Edison did not experience any major outage event days or major outage events. So the 50-hour rule did not come into play. So we had no data for that. The for the emergency or government emergency responder guarded down wires, we achieved 98.2% compared to the standard of 90%. So under system reliability, just a note that for improving reliability and resiliency, we are focusing on distribution automation schemes, including construction of circuit ties, as well as proactive underground cable replacement. We have 12 DA schemes installed to date, with the 13th coming this year. That impacts 24 circuits. So porous performing feeder, as mentioned, we did fail the repeat porous performing feeder standard. We had one circuit, the Eilers Valley circuit, that was ranked 3 years in a row. As staff mentioned in their report, that's about a 60-mile circuit serving 547 customers. It is located in northern Frederick County, which is a very rural and heavily treed area of the Catoctin Mountain region. It serves customers in Thurmont, Emmitsburg, and Sibyllsville areas. The main causes of outages were trees and wind. Remediation efforts in the past included vegetation management, new equipment installations, and that was conducted in 22 and 23. The corrective action plan for this period includes installation of a DA scheme. It's a one-sided DA scheme, so with the St. Anthony's circuit. So the St. Anthony's circuit is capable of carrying the entire Eilers Valley circuit, but the Eilers Valley circuit is not capable of carrying the entire St. Anthony's circuit. So it only automatically switches in one direction. The other direction can be switched manually if the loads are lighter on a given day, but it's only automated in one direction. Also, completion of a scheduled tree trim on a overbuilt subtransmission line for this year, and the plans are expected to be completed by December 1st of this year. And then I will pass it on to Matt to go over the abandoned call rate.
Good morning, Commissioners. As stated, my name is Matthew Green. I'm the Director of our care centers. And as indicated, we did miss our annual abandon percentage for 2023 at 5.19%. Part of our so there's two aspects of our corrective action plan. First and foremost is adding additional folks, adding additional people, adding additional call taking capacity. As indicated in our report, we have been plagued with retention and hiring challenges. We have adjusted our pay rates. We have assigned additional training to those individuals, given them additional opportunities for career advancement, to try to build some additional level of retention with them. Our plan is to add an additional 100 CSRs to our call taking capacity through the end of July. We're at 107, so well on our way, and we're going to go ahead and overshoot that amount because we know that we need to do better. Looking at the comparison between Potomac Edison and our peers, our rates are our abandon rates are almost double what our peers are, and that's an issue that we need to address, and we will. And it starts with call taking capacity, as well as then the second arm of this is around technology. So adding some the ability within our IVR system for customers to self-serve in that IVR, but then also an easier path to get to a live agent. I also see that, or what we have seen over the last couple of years is that the time at which customers abandon is quicker and quicker, which speaks to they don't want to wait, they're not willing to wait. So if we can get within the IVR, if we can provide them an opportunity to get to an agent quicker, in addition to just having greater call taking capacity, we should be able to bring our rates more in line, not only with the standard, but with our peers, which is in the best interest of all of our customers. I will tell you that year to date through July, we're about 4.91% of our abandon rate, which may not sound like much of an improvement, but I will also couch that with saying that this is one of our busiest times of year. We do see that abandon rate spike during the summer months, during times of higher move-in and move-out activity, times when bills are higher because of summer cooling. And so we have more customers reaching out to us to talk to us about payment arrangements and ways of getting payment assistance. So I anticipate that number to continue to come down throughout the rest of the year. Certainly, as like I said, we continue to add staff as well as adjust our technology accordingly.
Okay, just a quick comment on response to comments, we don't have a comment on staff's report. OPC's report, as kind of was already mentioned by the PHI companies, the definition of semi-N did change with the 2023 reporting period. It went from more than N outages to N or more outages. OPC's report, or OPC did ask a data request for us to report our historical numbers with the new definition, which we did, but they received the answer to that data request after their final report was drafted. The semi-N numbers for 2023 are not substantively different than previous years under the new definition. So with that, are there any questions?
Okay, Commissioner Richard.
No questions. Thank you for your report, and congratulations on meeting the standards. And thank you for your addressing the issues on the abandoned calls. I'm encouraged that by the steps you're taking and the fact that you're taking it very seriously. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Slushman.
Good morning. I actually have a couple questions. So, in terms of the Eilers Valley Circuit, so the cap for that won't be completed until the end of this year. So, is there a possibility for a repeat violation between now and when we see the cap? Or are you just in other words, are you monitoring the situation and are available to make sure that we don't have another violation?
Sure. There is a possibility, of course, but we only have 2 months left in the worst performing circuit reporting period. It goes from October 1st through September 29th, so we're pretty much at the end of July now, so we have August and September. That circuit is actually performing very well for the last 10 months. Anything can happen in the next 2 months, but I do not expect that to be on the list again at the way it's performing.
Okay, so I'm assuming because it's been a problem, you have some additional eyes on it to make sure that it's okay.
And the same can be said for the action plan from last year didn't occur till probably well into the reporting period. So we are gaining benefits now from previous action plans that were on that circuit.
In terms of the abandoned calls issue, and you've identified it as a problem and something that has kind of dogged you for a bit. Have you looked to other ways in which customers can connect with PE so that they don't run into the problems of waiting on a call for an extended period of time?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we have. So making adjustments, or not adjustments, but adding additional digital channels, so through certainly through the web, through email, and the other opportunity there within our IVR is that we do have the option for customers to take a callback. So we may say, hey, your current hold time is 15 minutes. Would you like a callback? And that callback works to hold their place in line. I realize that's still within the having someone call them back. But I think to your point, really what we're focusing on is trying to meet those customers in the channel of communication of their choice, whether it is through phone, web, email, actually, in the process of investigating live agent chat as well, that it is probably going to be more of a 2025 initiative for us.
Okay. In terms of mutual assistance, so you're signatories to the mutual assistance agreement, I'm assuming, through First Energy, or is PE its own signatory?
Yeah, I'll take that question.
Okay.
So thank you. So we are part of all the mutual assistance groups that exist around us.
Okay.
And that is through First Energy. So when there's a storm, whether it's in Potomac or in New Jersey, our incident command structure would trigger at First Energy. So we have a corporate emergency preparedness group that participates in all of those mutual assistance meetings. So while once the decision is made who's available, like you heard earlier about an example with FP&L, let's say they were available, that prior to us reaching out to them, there would already be discussions in the mutual assistance meetings on who has availability to assist.
Okay, and so that's kind of on a sort of an ongoing basis. You have and that's kind of what I was asking earlier. Is there sort of a database of who's available, and so who you can sort of tap into? You're shaking your head. So is there an internal database that First Energy maintains, or is there something sort of broader than that?
Yeah, not really so much a database as much. I mean, there is a list of contractors, for example, that we would reach out to as well. The mutual assistance groups for everyone that participates in mutual assistance groups are a very valuable resource. So when there's a potential hurricane, for example, those mutual assistance groups will activate and have conference calls to discuss, hey, here's what we're expecting, and companies will go ahead and put in their requests for, hey, I'm looking for 1,000 crews or things like that, as well.
Okay, so tell me, so there are multiple mutual assistance groups?
Yes, and I will tell you, I'm not an expert to be
Okay.
able to list them. We have a director of emergency preparedness.
Okay.
That his staff would be participating in those groups. So I'm not an expert.
Yeah, could you just
on that?
give us kind of, I mean, if you can go back and just sort of give us a list. I didn't know that there were, I mean, I know that utilities will sign mutual assistance agreements with the understanding that they will provide their services if needed, but I didn't, so I'd like to get sort of a better sense of what's kind of out there, and who do you have that you can sort of tap into to the extent that there's an emergency?
Yeah, I will just also add First Energy, our territory is not typically all hit with the same weather. So a hurricane maybe hits Maryland, we'd be able to pull resources internally to First Energy, which is where we would go first, from Ohio, for example, to help support that event, as well as utilizing neighboring utilities that have not been affected.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Barbe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I'd like to echo the comments of Commissioner Richard. I'm glad that you're looking into the drop call issue, and I agree with you that the best way to reach out to a customer when they have lost power is in the method that they prefer. I think a callback system is probably a good thing to do. There's nothing more reassuring to a customer than to talk to a person if that's what they choose to do. So I look forward to seeing your improvement on this over the coming year. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so on the downed wire issue, given your service territory, the size of it and the fact that it's a multiplicity of governments, I mean, do you have any difficulty in this access issue that, sort of plagued Pepco with some of theirs?
So we haven't seen problems with getting to the sites, but similar to what Pepco outlined, our responders that aren't qualified to de-energize wires, they just relieve the emergency responders there and guard against the public from accessing those sites. But we haven't had problems with them actually getting to the sites.
Okay, and this problematic feeder that we've talked about earlier, you said it's in the Emmitsburg area. Does that affect Camp David?
No, that's a different circuit and a different substation that serves Camp David.
Okay. Now, regarding the call center, do you have just one call center?
No, we have 3.
And are they located whereabouts in your service territory?
We have one in Akron, Ohio, one in Fairmont, West Virginia, and one in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And you have hiring problems in each one, or?
I would say more so in Akron and Reading. Fairmont actually happens to be our best source of talent today, but we're working in. So our centers are virtualized, meaning we take calls across all 3 locations, but we do treat them differently from a standpoint of the talent that we're recruiting and retaining. Now we also, want to make sure that things are fair and equitable, and that from a pay standpoint. But we realize that, it's a different it's a different job market in Reading versus Fairmont versus Akron.
And so if a customer in Hagerstown makes a call, it could go to any one of those three, depending upon sort of what the traffic is, or?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. With that, I guess we'll turn to Southern Maryland Electric Co-op.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Mark McDougall on behalf of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative. With me today on my immediate right is Herb Regal. He is SMECO's Vice President of System Planning Distribution Engineering. And to his right is Brian Lazarchik, SMECO's Vice President of Electric Operations and Construction. Behind me, I've got Tammy Gardner. And if you have any questions on the communications or customer care portion of our business, she's our Vice President of Customer Care and can answer any of those. Before I get started, I just want to say that we are very pleased that in 2023 we made all of our metrics. I've got a couple of things that I wanted to bring to the Commission's attention before we are made available for questions. The first is on the staff's comments regarding vegetation management. That's actually on page 50 of their comments. And what I wanted to point out is that SMECO had misreported, but then corrected two of our metrics on that table that you see in the middle of page 50. Instead of 739 miles of vegetation management performed, we performed 890 miles, and that reduced the average cost per mile from $12,621 to $10,480. I just want to make sure that you had the correct data in front of you. And to answer your question regarding weather services, Mr. Chairman, SMECO uses a 7-day hazard impact forecasts alerts from two online services, AccuWeather and Weather Guidance, but we also have available two meteorologists that we have that provide us with forecasts and storm alerts. So if you want to follow up on that, we're happy to answer that. But anyhow, with Mr. Regal and Mr. Lazarchik, I would like to just open up SMECO for any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for SMECO. Commissioner Sussman.
Good morning, Mr. McDougall. How are you?
I'm fine, Commissioner Sussman. How are you?
I'm good. In terms of mutual assistance, have you signed the NRECA mutual assistance agreement? Or have you signed a mutual assistance agreement? I guess I should sort of start that with.
I'm going to turn that over to Mr.
That would be fine.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Morning.
Brian Lazarchik, Vice President, Electric Operations and Construction for SMECO. So SMECO is an electric cooperative, and we, in 2023, partnered with the Virginia, Maryland, Delaware Association of Electric Cooperatives. With that, it gives us access to the mutual aid from all of the surrounding electric co-ops through those assigned states. One thing that we really appreciate from that connection is I myself don't have to make the individual calls for mutual assistance. We have a VMD rep who we just make one call to them, and then they reach out to all of the electric cooperatives in the Virginia, Maryland, Delaware area. If it's such a catastrophic event that we have to expand that, then that same state coordinator will reach out to other areas throughout the entire United States if need be.
Okay, but you don't have agreements with them, so you haven't worked out the, no, who is the agreement with?
The Virginia, Maryland, Delaware Association of Electric Cooperatives, and every co-op has to sign an agreement with the VMD, saying that they will support and send and receive.
Okay, so you do have access to co-ops all around the country?
We do.
And have you had to rely on co-ops outside of the DMV region for assistance?
Not to my recollection. In my time in this role, I've only reached out to co-ops within the Virginia, Maryland, Delaware region.
Okay, all right,
But
thank
we-
you.
We do utilize some contractors, primarily from the southeastern portion of the United States, that if it was a catastrophic event, we have called on.
Okay, and not have issues with availability? Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Sussman, I know that in catastrophic times in the past, we have reached out, as Mr. Lazarchik has mentioned, to Southeast electric cooperatives in Georgia and South Carolina, and they haven't hesitated to bring folks up. And I don't want to limit it to Georgia and South Carolina, but they're the ones that have most recently sent crews up to assist us in catastrophic situations.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
No questions, but congratulations and thank you for meeting all your performance and reliability requirements.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barbe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we will turn to Office of People's Counsel. Yeah, I see.
Good afternoon,
Yes,
Commissioner, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Philip L. Sussler, Legal Beagle from the Office of People's Counsel. And then with me to rescue me from errors is Sandeep Baidwan from Continuum Associates. He was the consultant that assisted us in preparing the comments, and he will either grab me or I reserve the right to defer technical questions, complex questions to him. So I guess I was going to address, and I'm between us and lunch, I think, so I got to...
Well, don't worry, take your time, we're good. So.
Okay. I was going to sort of address the reliability metrics briefly, and that was sort of the focus of inquiry across all of the witnesses and from the commission. Then a little bit more expansion on the continued performance and reliability metrics and their underlying causes, abstracted from our comments. Then, and this was one we had a colloquy about this, I think last year, about the CAPEX and OPEX spends that are reported in this proceeding, but weren't the focus of Commissioner inquiry. We think that's somewhat important to look at. And then following that is sort of a policy pitch. I think I was unsuccessful last year, but about how to sort of establish yardstick measurements across the EDCs. We evaluate them longitudinally, sort of in time as they perform against their standards. But the standards are different across the companies, and there's some good arguments why that's the case. But at a high level, I think there's some benefit from working through, so what are the truly explainable differences, and then some yardstick evaluation across the EDCs, which may be the subject of other proceedings, rate cases, or the distribution system planning, but at least in our view, that's a continuing question as to how that gets evaluated. So anyhow, that's preamble, and unfortunately I don't have any PowerPoints to sort of assist, so bear with me and pull me back if I go astray. So I guess starting out, the reliability metrics, I want to, as we did last year, really extend our thanks to the staff for preparing an excellent report and confirming that the EDCs met, in almost all cases, their reliability metrics. So that good job all around. I guess looking forward, and we weren't constrained necessarily because we could have filed comments, because of the simultaneous filing requirement that we filed together with staff, you'll see a lot of our comments duplicate what staff did, and staff probably did it, I'll be criticized when I get back to the office, but probably did it better than we did, but in terms of, and no offense, Sandy. But so next year, one of the things we're thinking about is maybe, and the commission should think about this, maybe a reply from OPC after the staff report comes in. So that we can onboard what the staff has done, oftentimes at much greater depth than we can, and then focus more accurately sort of where we might go. Anyhow, that's a suggestion going forward. And we weren't constrained. We could have always filed reply comments in the current procedure. So there's no, maybe aspersion on us for not having taken that opportunity already existing implicitly in the current procedure. But for next year, that might be a lesson learned. On the continued performance and reliability metrics, and I'm processing, and Sandeep is as well, some of the sort of responses from the EDCs in advance of our testimony now in this hearing. But just some comments. There's not enough trend line of available data to establish whether the improving performance of Maryland EDCs on the various reliability metrics will hold and continue to show similar trends in the future years, when at the macro level, such as weather conditions that directly impact reliability may be very different, climate change and so forth. Again, if this is a retrospective of 2023, that's maybe beyond the scope of what we can contemplate here, but it's something to keep in mind. As an example, SMECO attributes a significant improvement in its reliability performance to milder weather conditions observed in 2023 compared to 2022. Our office is concerned that the climate change, referencing my earlier comment, which is likely to lead to more severe weather conditions in the future, could upend this improving reliability performance observed with Maryland EDCs, putting service reliability experienced by Maryland ratepayers at risk. That comment sort of sounds like a one-off and maybe snarky, but I think there's sort of a systematic view, not for today, and based on the current requirements, but a systematic view about what climate change portends for these kinds of responses going forward. And again, this might not be the appropriate proceeding. It could be rate case, it could be distribution system planning, but an inquiring mind would ask it, and I'm asking it. Vegetation was the single largest source of outages in Maryland that directly impacted reliability, followed by pesky animals past year. Hence, Maryland EDCs need to maintain a sharp focus on proactive vegetation management to ensure that the risks associated with the single largest contributor to sustained and momentary outages remain manageable. I'm not saying they don't do that, but that's sort of as you work through all the data, that's another sort of systematic observation that the company should be mindful of going forward. PE has installed electric fences at substations, which may be positively impacting the outages caused by animals, i.e. reducing them. However, there's not sufficient data points available for OPC to conclude on the effectiveness of this approach. The OPC believes that the EDCs have to take more proactive measures to address outages caused by animals, the second largest factor after vegetation. OPC would like to see more data on the impact that some of these measures are having to address outages caused by animals in subsequent annual filings, not current. Some of the this gets to some of the comments earlier today, perhaps resolving our concern, but addressing it. Some of the Exelon companies have incorporated technology to improve their reliability performance, but there are trade-offs. For each example, Pepco attributes use of distribution automation and increased installation of reclosers as the reason for reduction in sustained outages and potentially improving its safety and safety measures. These are welcome steps, but Pepco also notes that such steps may be increasing the momentary outages, reference to comments earlier in the hearing. And the Pepco experiences, ratepayers are experiencing leading to deterioration in the Mayfie index. So there's some trade-offs as you sort of what you're targeting in terms of what you're trying to optimize. We note the problem. You've heard the comment from the Pepco folks about why they believe that's appropriate. We find it concerning and maybe worth some further inquiry. The sustained outages observed by ratepayers in this case is decreasing. The nuisance of momentary outages, which decrease the quality of power supplied to ratepayers, may negatively impact the useful life of customer appliances and equipment. It is generally a nuisance for ratepayers that should be avoided. So again, as you move between the metrics, it could be a zero-sum game depending on the impacts. OPC urges the Commission to closely monitor these metrics, which are not subject to the COMAR standards or minimum thresholds. These reliable metrics would be CAIDI, SEMI, and MAFI. The Commission should take proactive and corrective measures with EDCs when continuous and sustained deterioration of these additional reliability metrics is observed. Now I'm going to turn to the CAPEX and OPEX issues, which weren't a focus of prior discussion, not from the Commissioner's questions. We do get a lot of data in the reports about this. And so I charge Sandeep with look through it. Can we offer up any conclusions, understanding that this may not be the proceeding to decide those things, but we think it's valuable information. The Commission's file it. There's some institutional memory I'm not fully aware of as to why it's part of the filing. And you know, should be I think a subject of inquiry, if not for this proceeding, but for future proceedings. OPC remains very concerned with the wide-ranging discrepancies across those expenditure reports when you compare actual versus budgeted spend, specifically for distribution, CAPEX, and O&M. As an example, Pepco had the best performance on its reliability metrics that were tracked through the COMAR set thresholds, but it also overspent on its CAPEX budget in aid of reliability improvements by 45% between the budgeted and actual amount in 2023. A similar trend was also observed with BGE, where the difference in budgeted and actual distribution was 40%. Difference in budgeted and actual distribution O&M spend was 19%. They had a marginal improvement in SAIDI and SAIFI. SMECO, on the other hand, underspent on its CAPEX for reliability improvements by 9% between budgeted and actual. It also achieved a much narrower overspending of 4% between budgeted and actual O&M spend in 2023. They improved their reliability performance significantly in 2023 compared to 2022. Through our assessment of CAPEX and OPEX spending of the various EDCs, a consistent, and this gets to this issue of the yardstick element that is sort of not framed, but we have information that potentially could frame this issue. There's a consistent causal relationship could not be established between the high CAPEX and OPEX spending and the marginal impact on reliability that we see from the EDCs. Significant overspending or underspending is a significant concern for OPC, and we think counter to the best interests of ratepayers. I guess the information's here. I think from the colloquy from last year, it sunk in, maybe not completely, that this isn't the forum to decide those things, but we think useful and needs to have a home somewhere, I think, to be joined. As a result, the Commission, OPC urges the Commission to take cognizance of these wide budget-related discrepancies, which have been observed in varying degrees over the years with the various Maryland EDCs, and ask the EDCs to incorporate more robust, thorough, and accurate budgeting practices. The Commission should also incorporate a methodology to evaluate spend versus a reliability metric for various EDCs, both over time and across the companies. There was another initiative that sort of relates to this in I think the PHI merger case. One of the requirements is that the Exelon companies report, they call it an across-the-fence report every year. And it comes in, I think, end of June. And it compares, large part of it doesn't relate to reliability metrics, but part of it is to compare SAIFI and SAIDI across the Exelon affiliates, both in Maryland and outside of Maryland. Sort of at a high level, and high level can be dangerous. I think the thought is again, you can do not just a longitudinal, over time evaluation of how these companies are performing against their reliability metrics, but you can compare companies as to how they're doing. And I think that ultimately is a useful exercise, a yardstick measurement. I'm mindful, and you know, we've got experts in the company, with staff, and with the Commission, with a lot of institutional memory of how these metrics evolved, and that they're very different service territories. And so, from the get-go, you can't have a single set of metrics across all the companies. Okay, I get that, but creating a logical map between where one company might be and where another to allow some yardstick competition, I think that would be useful. Again, I think Commissioner Suchman had sort of told me, I think last year, if I remember right, that some of this was sort of outside the forum to be dealt with in other forums. But I think it's useful, the information comes in these filings, and what to do with it. And those are suggestions about what to do with it. So let me stop there, and Sandeep can answer all your questions, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, thank you again, as always, for OPC's very thorough report. I think some of the areas are interesting to talk about, the CapEx and, looking in even to transmission and distribution. I think it's good to keep those in mind, but they are, I believe, a little bit out of the scope for what we're trying to do here specifically. I guess one question I do want, maybe just help me to kind of reconcile and understand the OPC's position. In the past years, you've cautioned about diminishing returns and the fact that we do need to keep an eye on the cost of these reliability standards. This year, you did spend some time on some of the non-required metrics, those that were that are involved with the short duration, the momentary duration events, and asking us to take a look at should we be holding utilities to I guess a standard. Isn't there a risk there though of again expanding this for indeterminate benefit? But definitely there would be cost involved if we were to start taking these types of actions against utilities. Wouldn't they feel then compelled to come up with, even if it's not necessarily a requirement, coming up with some kind of measures that would involve an expense if we began to try to go after some of these, again, short duration metrics, again, for a benefit that's I think really undetermined. Perhaps there's an appliance that breaks somewhere, but again, do you have any comment on that?
Excellent question, and I'm not sure I have a complete answer because the two can sort of exist. We are concerned about the cost impact and diminishing returns. I think with the last reset for the next 4 years, we made our arguments, and the Commission decided against us in terms of sort of moving the metrics up. In our discussion here, I guess if they're out there, notwithstanding they're not binding, I don't think we're asking them to be binding, but if they're out there and they're either not being complied with or there's a compliance.
What do you mean by complied with? There really isn't a requirement.
But there, how do I put it? Okay, so first point is in order to know something, you need to measure it. There's a huge value in measurement. So I guess in theoretical terms, to have these additional measures, which are getting at the performance as customers see them, that's to the good. Mm-hmm. And then because they're asked by the Commission and responded to by the utilities, those are data points. Mm-hmm. That's to the good. We haven't pursued it to, well, if you made them binding, what are the cost impacts coming back, other than just a comment. They're out there. They do measure sort of how the customer is feeling or being impacted by the utility, so they have value. The cost-benefit analysis is not something we're weighing in on and asking that they be binding. Hopefully that's responsive.
Yeah, that's helpful. Again, when I think in your comments you said we should take proactive and corrective measures with EDCs when these secondary, I don't know if you use secondary, but these other metrics are, we're noticing deterioration. So I just want to make sure I understand, from OPC again that, on one hand, we need to be mindful. That's been something you've called on the commission to be very mindful of the cost and the diminishing returns. But, if we are going to start, at your recommendation to take these proactive and corrective measures, well, I personally would need to have further guidance and understanding of what OPC is intending for us to do, again, as we balance those two requirements, because I think it was Ms. Beckham said, we may be just, the way she said it, this is, we're finding that we're so successful that now we're having these other, issues, successful as we're putting these automated devices on to make sure that we don't have the sustained outages. But in any case, so not really a question there, but just, again, as OPC, weighs these two issues, cost, benefit, and these other metrics, to provide the kind of, I guess, clarity at what you intend and are asking the commission to do.
Yeah, no, excellent question. I'm not giving you a full response, other than one of the things missing is the marginal benefit and cost of what would happen if we did push to make those things that needed to be complied with, as opposed to right now metrics, but without sort of effect.
Okay.
Phil, if you don't
Yeah,
mind, can I
go ahead,
add some
yes,
content?
Actually, before you start, could you spell your name for the court reporter?
Sure. My first name is Sandeep, spelled as Sandeep, and the last name is Badwan, spelled as Baidwan.
Okay. Go right ahead.
All right. So, Commissioner Richard, I think what we are trying to say here is that these short-term outages, even though there is no standard for it, they can be a real nuisance. I can give you a real example of it. We are increasingly living in a world where electronic devices are much more pervasive. Even at our facility, we run a lot of very heavy-duty servers, and when you have a momentary outage, all these workstations go down. It takes them 15-20 minutes to come up to speed back again. So there is a cost to something like this. And the point we are trying to make is, even these momentary outages are very, very short duration. If you're watching a football game on a TV, maybe it does not impact you much. But there are businesses to whom they impact. And there's a cost of loss of productivity when these momentary outages do happen. So I think the point I wanted to make was, they should be monitored and kept a close eye on, because we are increasingly living in a world where electronic devices, heavy-duty computing, data centers, those things are becoming much more pervasive, and that's where these momentary outages do have an impact. So I just wanted to present a context for your reference, why this is something of a concern to the OPC. Phil, correct me if you don't know.
No, I just, but the marginal sort of benefit from additional expenditure, that hasn't really been framed.
Yep.
And would be an important issue to frame in order for OPC to move forward and say, yes, make it mandatory. So it's an issue of concern, and it has real benefit in that it's a measurement that allows you folks, the companies, and us, and the public to sort of see where the companies are going relative to customer impact. But without that cost benefit framed, it's a little hard for us to decide sort of, should it be binding, should it not be?
Yeah. Okay. No, that's helpful. I know it's annoying to suddenly have to run around the house and fix all those flashing, 12 o'clock, clocks that are going on. But whether or not I want to see a rate increase for that, I don't know. So anyway, thank you.
Mr. Sussman.
So I guess that is kind of an interesting question. Where does the analysis come in? Does it come in here? Does it come in a rate case? Because ultimately it's a prudency issue and issues around cost recovery. I mean, I know NERC always deals with that extra 9, the 99.9. Like how far out do you take that 9, and what's the cost of that, and how much are you willing to impose that cost on on ratepayers. I don't think any of the analysis that's being done here is wasted effort. That's all going to play into the next rate case for all the utilities that are here. But I understand your point about where should the analysis be done? Where's sort of the most effective way in which the analysis can, I mean, we're not going to be making cost recovery decisions in this case, but to the extent that we can do some of the analysis here that's going to find its way into the next rate case, is this the better place to do it? And I guess we'll think about it. I'll think a little bit more about this. So, thank you.
Commissioner Barbe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to put my financial accounting management cap on and ask a couple of questions here. The first question is, in this analysis, in this comparison between CapEx and performance, are you just measuring the CapEx from this year, or are you measuring it from over the last 3 or 4 years?
We did compare the CapEx and OpEx spend to last year's spend as well.
Okay. So let me tell you why I think that's probably I think it's probably inappropriate to compare 1 year's CapEx or even 2 years CapEx to performance in the current year. In my experience in the private sector, maintenance and operation costs have to be maintained diligently over a long period of time in order to experience an improvement in day-to-day performance. So, I don't know if it's really appropriate to say that CapEx went up last year for a marginal improvement this year. I think the more appropriate way to analyze this from a business managerial point of view is to say what's been spent over the last 5 years, how has it been spent, and how has that impacted reliability and efficiency in the current years. Would you care to comment on that?
Yes, Commissioner. I think we were. I would agree with what you're saying. I think the focus of our analysis was not as much on a trend line of CapEx or OpEx spend. It was more in terms of why there tends to be so much discrepancy in what's being budgeted and what's being spent. So I think OPC's comments here are more focused on that there needs to be a more better budgeting practices by Maryland EDCs. We would like to see a better forecasting of these budgets, both CapEx and OpEx, and it would be good to see EDCs sticking to those to what they're forecasting in terms of actual spend.
But also just to hopefully amends favorably. Commissioner Barbe's question, I think we should onboard that. I mean, that's an inquiry that we missed, and we should have included it in our comments. Because you're absolutely right. A longer term period is sort of a better anchor to any conclusions that one might draw about those points.
Yeah, and I'm obviously, being a recovering accountant, I'm not opposed to comparing budget to actuals, but to me, the analysis point ought to be one of what is actually spent over 5 years, say, and what kind of elements are being, what the money is being spent upon, and then comparing that in an ongoing fashion to improvements or lack of improvements in performance. Because, again, it's to make it a very, very simple comparison, you gotta, if you're one of those people who drive gasoline automobiles, you gotta change the oil every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. And, a sudden increase in that maintenance cost may not be viewed in the current year or even in the next year, but, you won't have a blown engine. And that's, in maintenance and operations, oftentimes positive outcomes are, noted more in the form of disasters that do not occur. So it can be a very difficult thing to evaluate. That's just my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just if I may, just to follow up, shame on us. Excellent point. And Sandeep, is that something we can look at?
We definitely can look at it.
Yeah, we'll look at it and put it into a filing between now and decision date. And then for next year, lesson learned, our comments will be better honed, because I think that's a very important question. That if I'm standing up this back part of the filings that weren't the focus of the proceeding, and to make it meaningful, I think the commissioner's question and an answer to it is really warranted. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm, quite familiar with this concern about, are we, getting enough bang for the buck with this reliability spending and what versus how much of an increase we get in the various metrics. But I am concerned that we now put the companies between a rock and a hard place, because if they fail, then when they come here next year, then they're kind of kicked around the room by us for not doing that. But on the other hand, we don't necessarily want to encourage them to overspend in the idea of trying to create this reliability metric that we're holding them to. So I guess, some ideas on a way to do the analysis to sort of look at this to make sure that we're, spending as much as is needed to be spending, but not spending more than that. And obviously I realize it's a pretty difficult needle to thread, but that's kind of where we're at in this situation. And because, reliability and having a response by the companies to outages is something that's very important to customers, and I think it is something that customers are willing to pay for, but we don't want them to pay more than they need to. So.
Yeah, excellent point. Now, when the next 4-year standard was set under John Borkowski, but the current staff are pursuing that. There was an analysis, and so the hook in my mind was the kink. Mm-hmm. In other words, sort of we start to spend additional dollars to move the metric sort of to better performance. Mm-hmm. That expenditure hits the sort of the wrong side of the kink, and diminishing returns kicks in fast. And as I understand it, that was the framework for deciding the future 4-year forecast. And I guess OPC's intervention at that point, which the commission decided against, was to move the lever sort of a little bit less in terms of improving the reliability metric, and a little bit towards sort of less of that incremental spend. And that's a policy choice, and the commission has the authority and power to decide it. So I think embedded in the next 4-year standard is that rationale. We just came out slightly different last time, and we'll probably be slightly different the next time, just because we're very concerned about affordability and the way this ramifies into the ratepayers' cost at the end of the day. But there is a metric that staff currently uses to make that evaluation, and then it's a sort of a policy dispute, I think, as to where you come out on it. Hopefully that's responsive.
No, it is. So okay, well, other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And that was the last presentation, so we are adjourned.